Hello, everybody. Thank you, Marie, for introducing me. And as you all know, my name is Samantha Hinger. I am an autistic advocate with the University of Washington. I'm also the developmental disabilities and mental health program consultant with who do I work for? The Department of Children, Youth, and Family Services. Um, so I wear a lot of hats. I am ADHD, so have both autism and ADHD. I also parent multiple neurodiverse humans, and so that's what our presentation will be about today. If I can get this started. Um, there we go. Why didn't it work? Hold on, I broke it. There we go. Okay, there. That's working now. So today I want to talk about the um, neurodiverse parenting and just the intricacies and differences in neurodiverse parenting, especially when it is in regards to parenting also neurodiverse children, because that is just my life. And I do just in the beginning want to note that most neurodivergent parents don't know that they are, neurodiverse until later in life, if at all. And I think that that's really important for a lot of professionals to know, especially in, mental health and social workspace, is that there are many adult humans who don't have accurate diagnoses or don't know their diagnoses and have just kind of been labeled incorrectly all their lives, which we'll kind of get into a little bit. Um, I want to start by talking about just the differences in sensory needs when it comes to, neurodiverse humans and parenting, um, body processes, sensory overstimulation, quite similarly to pain, as most of you know. And you are more sensitive to things that are already kind of created to be overstimulating. So I'm thinking about, things like babies crying, which is created to be a sensory overstimulating situation biologically, right? To trigger parents to respond and react to their child's needs. So much so that, all parents are warned about babies crying and how to respond to that and what to do when you get overwhelmed. But a lot of that doesn't take neurodiversity and sensory overstimulation into consideration as being a more overwhelming experience. There are also differences in bonding and oxytocin processing that are related to sensory needs. It's For me personally, I had a lot of trouble with oxytocin processing. It was very overwhelming to me. I actually would kind of moving on into like breastfeeding pieces when I was a breastfeeding person, I would actually get hives from the oxytocin letdown. It was very dysregulating and uncomfortable. I would become irritable. It was not pleasant. Um, and I think that there's, not a lot of honest conversations about that in general, but then when it comes to, that over between parents and children, right? Like I'm a very touch sensitive human and children like to touch, they like to be on you, they like to be held, and that's important for their development, right? So I've had to kind of take a step back and figure out how to regulate my own needs to be able to give them what they need. Um, and it is like a sudden shift from caring for yourself, utilizing, sensory routines that you've kind of embedded in life, um, to all of the sudden everything about your life is different and access to those things that were being used aren't easily available anymore. Which kind of leads into the topic of sense of self and routine. So, neurodivergent humans have, a lot of us have a desire for set routines. A lot of us have, these interests that we want to divulge ourselves in, that we want to really have be a large, meaningful part of our lives, right? Um, and then all of the sudden, a tiny human is completely reliant on you for survival, and that changes everything. Tiny human, big human, all humans. It seems that my mom says it doesn't end when you become adults either. So you're just parenting a human forever once you are a parent. Um, and so your time to engage in those special interests or regulate in the ways that worked before don't work anymore. Like it's completely different. You have to basically change every aspect of your life, while many of us already struggle with that change aspect. Creating brand new routines around your child's needs. And also having to build an entirely new sense of self and who you are, around what it means to be a parent. And, neurodivergent humans often have a harder time developing their sense of self anyway, um, especially, in those teenage years. So when people, the average kind of age range of having children is kind of when a lot of neurodivergent humans start to really develop their sense of self. And then it's kind of all just broken down and you have to start over from whatever base you had to begin with. And one thing I learned about more recently is known as monotropic split. And this idea that um, you are only have a certain amount of attention and energy that you are able to give to the things around you. And so, um, you know, neurotypical holistic humans tend to be more polytropic and be able to focus on, divide their attention amongst many different things, and be able to kind of weigh their attention based on the importance of the things around them. Monotropic processors focus on fewer kind of attention streams than neurotypical people do. And we aren't always able to kind of decipher what needs more attention than others, right? So the attention to detail that is being split amongst all of these things doesn't change. It doesn't decrease based on importance like it does for other people. And that's when that overwhelm occurs, is when we're forced to process and attend to more information than our brains are designed to do. So one thing that really stands out to me, as on a personal level where I experience this, is I will not often engage in my special interests when my children are awake, when I am, supposed to be working, when I'm supposed to be focusing on several things at once. I won't have my special interests around me. Because that's all I want to do. That's all I want to focus on. So, for example, my puzzles, I will do puzzles. My husband, the lovely human that he is, bought me a puzzle table for Christmas. So I have this amazing place to do them. But once I start, that's all I want to do. That's all I want to focus on. And if I'm interrupted, I'm pissed about it. If I have to go to the bathroom, so mad. Like, don't interrupt me. Um, but that I'm not able to split my attention from those things because of how important they are, because of how much I care about them. I'm not, it's harder for me to step away, and that's where I want my energy. And so when I've noticed that irritability increase when my children would need something from me, I've just kind of had to decide these are the times when I'm going to focus on these things, so that I don't have to split my attention. And then executive dysfunction is something that many of us, all of us neurodivergent humans, kind of experience that cognitive phenomenon impacting our ability to really just plan, organize, start, and finish tasks. And this is kind of where I think about how neurodivergent parents are labeled in society and by other people. Um, Especially those who really don't know that they're neurodivergent and can't advocate for themselves differently, right? So there's a lot of those labels, like lazy, not trying hard enough, disorganized, messy. Yeah, I can, there's so many that I can think of. I just can't even say them anymore. But those systems that were put into place, that were developed, throughout our lives, aren't as effective once children are kind of in the picture because you now have somebody else affecting the things that you're required to do. So the cleaning that you do does not stay clean. It's a never-ending battle. Whereas before, you could kind of set up systems in place and keep things clean and organized in a way that was meaningful to you. Now, all of a sudden, somebody's messing that up all of the time. And that really I think one of the biggest differences I've seen in just neurodivergent parenting in general is the way that the societal pressures kind of unfold. There is a disconnect and misunderstanding of how neurodivergent and neurotypical parents parent. Um, there's, differences in how professionals view you. There's smaller social networks. And professionals a lot of times don't understand, right? They have these preconceived notions of what, parents should look like, what good parenting looks like. So when my kid is late to school because we can't seem to get organized and moving in the mornings, no matter what time we wake up, that ends up falling on me, right? When my kid is absent regularly because she's more prone to illness, that falls on me. Somehow that's my responsibility, to get her to school within the good attendance timeframes that they have set. But also, I feel like she needs to be home and take care of herself. And, it's not anybody's fault that she is more sick. It's a whole thing. But there's this shame and isolation and overwhelm that neurodivergent parents feel within these systems because it always is like a cycle of not trying hard enough, not being good enough, not doing the right things, right? And there's that double empathy problem bias happening as well, where you just have kind of a more negative idea of who neurodivergent people are. Um,
Samantha,
yeah,
I wanted to jump in really quickly because there's a comment in the chat that I wanted to read. But first, I just wanted to say, like, honestly, hard same. Being autistic, taking things literally, not knowing that I was autistic, as you know, my kids started getting identified. The amount of judgment from strangers, extended family, and then the school trying to talk about behavioral issues is sort of implying that it was coming from me. So they would say, "Well, I don't know what you guys do at home." And I was like, "Well, we don't bite each other. Like
yeah,
these things are not realistic for like what we're doing. This is not a reflective of my parenting. This is my kid is like having a tough time and needs a different level of support." So one of the comments is, yes, I so agree with everything you said before. I'm an ADHD or mother of a 6.5-year-old autistic and likely ADHD or child and a 2.5-year-old unknown neurotype. Seems holistic. My needs are so hard to meet, overstimulated by sound and touch and discomfort, task switching, change of routine, lack of time, and inability to intensely focus on my interests, increasing executive functioning demands. Um, and it is just the competing needs that you're naming, and then competing needs in engaging in honestly some systems of oppression.
yes, 100%. And it's you shared that story about the school system and that conversation about behaviors, and our conversations were a lot of the opposite too, right? Where I'm like, we are experiencing this at home because of the masking she's being forced to do at school. And that disconnect that the school had about, well, we're not seeing any of that here. It's like, okay, but she's still autistic. Like this is happening because she's overwhelmed at school. She comes home where she's safe and she just decompresses and it's all out. And now we have the meltdown, right? And there's just such a lack of understanding and this deficit-based system where she has to be failing within their systems before she can get the supports that she needs to be successful, not just there, but at home too. Um, yeah,
Absolutely. And I think that you're really hitting on something that's incredibly important, especially just like, as moms, is that like, the kid that I'm talking about was identified at 3 because he's a cis boy with big behaviors. But my other kid, who's assigned female at birth, just now, I've been asking for like 15 years for them to get assessed. Just now, they're 17 or in the middle of their assessments, finally. But
yeah,
people believing us and us being able to communicate within systems is so difficult. Somebody wrote in here that one of the biggest benefits to me knowing I'm autistic was that I understood my mom through a different lens. She is autistic also. I had no idea she had the same sensory differences and struggles that I did.
yeah. And that actually leads perfectly. Oh, wait, that's autistic burnout. I'll go back to that. But there's a lot of strengths in neurodivergent parenting that I've noticed in myself. Just and I am self-identified. I have a spreadsheet somewhere of how I completely align with the DSM criteria, which I had one for my daughter also and helped with her diagnosis. But this I'm able to recognize my children's needs through my experience lens and be able to really identify those sensory triggers or demand avoidant triggers for her behavior and really put the right supports into place for her. Um, I recognize the importance of special interests. So that's a lot of how we bond and engage in things together is doing the things that she loves and care about, like regardless of how I feel about it. Because I recognize like how important that is. Um, and it's just like increased my advocacy for her in all of the various settings and has allowed me to change my parenting style from, that societal idea of control that parents are supposed to have to increased autonomy and choice and making sure she understands the reasons for things and using her special interests to really be able to teach the importance of some of these social rules that we have to follow. So thinking about like my child has a special interest in human body and anatomy. So being able to use that to explain why it's important to eat a variety of foods or what certain foods like do to help her, why it's important to sleep, what sleep does for your body. Like those are all things that help me increase buy-in with her. Um, and there are enough differences between parenting styles of neurodiverse and neurotypical humans that like there are conversations about how neurodivergent parenting to a neurotypical child feels the same as that neurodivergent children being parented by neurotypical parents. So that those feelings of neglect, those feelings of, you know, not getting your needs met the way that you need them to, it's kind of a twofold situation because your experiences just don't align. My experience as a neurodiverse human don't align with, I don't have any neurotypical children, but if I did, like it would not align with their needs, right? And I would not understand how to parent them as effectively as I do my neurodiverse children. I do want to jump back to autistic burnout, and I share this because it was a very important piece of my journey. Um, this was the reason I learned about myself as an autistic human, and it tends to happen more to, for high masking, especially AFAB humans, it tends to happen more in the parenting journey from my understanding and information gathering. Um, but that autistic burnout occurring when high life stress and masking um, doesn't fit the abilities that you have, and it doesn't match the expectations of everybody else in society. You're exhausted, you start to lose skills, that stimulation tolerance is so much lower, and I felt like I was completely losing myself. I had increased support needs. Like it was lucky if I showered once a week. Like I still struggle with brushing my teeth regularly. Like I still struggle with hygiene. Like there are things that skills that I still haven't gotten back. Um, like let my house go, let everything go. Those are still skills I'm struggling to get back. Um, but there's a lot of dismissal and misunderstanding of those symptoms by professionals, leading to a lack of support and misdiagnosis. So, all these years being told, I'm just depressed, I'm just anxious, I almost got an OCD diagnosis at one point. Um, and then being able to look back and go, oh no, I've just been overstimulated my entire life. I just wasn't, being met where I was at and kind of pushing myself and who I am down to be able to meet the expectations of society. And then all of a sudden I had, children and I had cancer and I had a pandemic and I had, an unsupportive work environment and I had all of these things. that just bubbled to the surface and shut me down. Um, and it took a lot of years and natural ways of kind of increasing my stimulation tolerance, learning coping skills, and really what helped me the most and what really drove me to talk about more of these things is being able to put names to these things that I was experiencing. So finding autistic content creators and hearing about their experiences and realizing I'm not, quote unquote crazy, like I'm just autistic, right? I'm just thinking about things differently. My brain is processing things differently. And that was empowering. Um, I was able to be more purposeful about my support needs, about setting aside time to engage in the things that I cared about. Um, about advocating for myself and not just toughing through overstimulation, buying noise canceling headphones because kids are loud, man. Um, Figuring all of those things out is what really saved me. Um, I don't know what would have happened if I didn't learn that I was autistic, if I didn't find the community. I think it could have been a lot different, and it would have went down a different path. But I'm thankful that I did. And one of my favorite parts of the autistic, DSM criteria that they've added in is that, you know, diagnosis can be missed and that, symptoms may not fully manifest until your needs outweigh the society, basically. Like it gets to the point where you're not able to take care of yourself through these natural systems that you've put into place, and the stress and demands from society kind of outweigh those capabilities. And that is one of my favorite things that changed my life is realizing no, all of these things were present. All of these things have been present throughout my life, but they looked different because of masking, because of, expectations, because at, 7, 8, 10, hanging out in your room and doing the same puzzles over and over again is just a kid engaged in a quiet activity, right? But as an adult, it's a lot harder to do that. And people think it's, not quite as normal of a thing, And anyway, I digress.
Before we move off of autistic burnout,
Yeah.
there's a couple things in the chat. One of them is sort of the idea of eloping is causing a significant element for our ability to handle our own activities of daily living. So research that I've read is that like generally 50% of autistic kids elope, meaning that they leave safe spaces. And it's usually two different elements is either they're sort of like interested in something that they're following, which is sort of what I think of as like following the butterfly, or that they're fleeing distressing stimuli. Um, and how much that can really impact burnout of like I can't even pee or like sleep fully. There's like all of these things. And I know that I had alarms and locks on all doors and windows, and my kids still figured out ways to leave. Um, and when I tried to talk to the preschool teacher about it, she told me to get an electrified goat fence so that he'd be electrified if he tried to leave. And I said, I don't think CPS would like that. And she goes, CPS would understand. Um, which leads me to the other comment that's sort of like populating in here, which is that like, there's this great strength for us as autistic parents understanding our children, but then oftentimes schools or other systems won't listen to us and often think the neurodivergent parent is actually the problem. Um, and how frustrating that is. And I know that like I will just I started CCing a professional, even if it was a friend, on every email so that the school would take me seriously because as a professional going to meetings, I was treated much differently than a parent going to meetings.
Yeah, I relate to that. I will send emails sometimes from, my professional email address to the school because I feel like I'll be taken more seriously if I email from there versus my personal email, which is wild. And then I do have just some of the research that contributed to this, interesting, things to read about. In this whole journey, I just really realized that there's not a lot of research on neurodivergent parenting, especially autistic parenting, but um, there's just not the knowledge base and research available that these professionals base their information off of, right? So it's it's kind of, for lack of a better term, it sucks that this entire population is kind of being um pushed aside, so to speak, and really not learned about. Like there is a lot of research on how parenting styles affect the executive functioning uh, of children, which I'd be interested to learn more about whether that's just a genetic component, right? But these things aren't being discussed in the literature. And I don't know how to change that, but it's definitely um, doing a disservice to neurodivergent parents. And that's it. So, and I know Marie and I spoke about kind of having some time after this to actually, pause the recording and talk more openly, I think, about experiences, just because again, one of the things that really helped me the most is being able to put words to the things that I was experiencing as a human, as a parent. And I'm only able to really report a lot of this through my lens because there isn't a lot of research. So while, my response to stress and overstimulation is shut down, and that's most of, my children's experience as well. So we don't have the same experience of elopement as, Marie has had in her life, in their life. And um I I would love to hear more about other people's experiences. If you're interested in sharing, I would love to be able to just talk about the ways that this shows up for um professionals and clients and the just the variety of things that humans have experienced in this journey. I think that that's really powerful and important. And also, if you have any questions, please ask.
I'll chime in with a question. So I am an ADHDer parenting an ADHD 5-year-old, and my husband is kind of in denial about his own ADD, which I'm like pretty sure is going on. And we've tried to find different like neurodivergent parenting resources, and basically I'm sort of at this place where like I've like because I'm a therapist and I work with these same populations, like I'm already doing a lot of the things that people recommend. And so it's been really hard for us to find like coaches or people who like have like a step above like what we're already trying to do. So I don't know if you have any resources or something that can like touch upon that. That would be really helpful for me. And I have a lot of clients who are parents too. So that would be helpful for all of us.
Yeah, well, I will put a shout out for there is the and Zach, I may call on you just to help me navigate the resource because you know it a lot better than I do. But thinking about the, autistic parents group on Meetup and Square Pegs, that is available. It's remote, and they meet monthly. And Zach put the link in the chat. Um, I think that's one of the most helpful things for parents is just connecting with other parents like you, but like in the disability space, that can be problematic, right? Because we have a lot of spaces where it's, parents of autistic children or parents of neurodivergent children who are utilizing the space for things that, neurodivergent parents would not find helpful and could find, really problematic and harmful. So this group, which honestly I wish had more members and had more people going regularly, um, is a great place to build those connections and talk about those different experiences that parents have in a neurodivergent lens and with neurodiverse children. That's, I think, is one of the most uh, helpful resources that I can think of, just because you're right, most of the professionals, unless they're neurodiverse themselves, really, and parents of neurodiverse kids, really don't have much more to bring to the table than what you're already doing. And I wish I could be more help, but I think, the most community and helpfulness that I have found is through, connecting with content creators and finding, again, hearing those experiences and just feeling less alone and learning creative things that other people are doing.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thanks for your presentation. I really benefited today.
Thank you. I'm so glad.
I also wanted to give a shout out to local ARCs because they have a parent-to-parent program. So usually there's an ARC with each county or with the state. And then what they do is they try to match a parent up who has a very similar journey, but it's a little further along. It's a totally like unpaid, just for our connection sort of thing. And then a lot of people have enjoyed the Hickey app. And then I really like, there's a Facebook group called Autistic Women Plus Living Authentically um, that I think has some more people specifically talking about just sort of what it's like to be a parent from that lens. But one of the things that I think is really difficult that I've experienced, and I don't know if you've experienced this, Samantha, is when parents start at leasting each other. So going into a group space where you're saying, this is the problem that I have, and then somebody's like, well, at least your kid can talk to you. And I think that that's the part of like not just sort of diving in full vulnerability into these spaces, but like I trust the Square Pegs group, but some other spaces where just thinking about, like what is it for your heart to go into those spaces and what do you need?
I'll jump in and do a little bit of info dumping to the extent that it's helpful for people. I'd need a minute to pull it together and I could send some things out, but to speak to some of the questions here, there's a number of Facebook groups about, sort of neurodivergent parenting, progressive neurodivergent parenting, neurodiversity affirming parenting. And I think most of the people in those spaces recognize their own neurotypes or their own exploration of their neurotypes and how that functions and factors into their parenting. I know you talked about research, and I saw within the last 24 hours, but I couldn't find it right now, that the autistic PhD, who I think is out of University of Sussex, is doing research right now on autistic parents of neurodivergent children. AANE, which is, they changed their name, so I can't remember what it stands for now. Association for Autism and Neurodiversity has parent coaching as well as parent groups. And while not necessarily targeting neurodivergent parents of neurodivergent kids, as you know, most neurodivergent kids have one or more neurodivergent parents. And so that ends up being part of the group. But the coaches themselves, I believe, give descriptions of themselves. And some of the coaches identify as being autistic or otherwise neurodivergent. And so that could be a coaching outlet or resource that might feel like a good fit. And I'm presently in the very end stages of launching my online course on neurodivergent parent burnout and speaking to many of the things that you've talked about, Samantha, as it relates to neurodivergent parents of neurodivergent kids recognizing sort of this imbalance between their capacities and the demands that are placed upon them for all the complex reasons that people here know about, and often through that experience, as you indicated, recognizing their own kind of undiagnosed neurotype and neurotype needs and how that factors into parenting challenges. And so those are some of the resources. As I said, I'm happy to pull together some of the different groups that I'm aware of to just load out to this larger group in case those are resources that people aren't already familiar with that might be helpful for people to find more of a community.
That would be wonderful, Corey. That for like I would love that personally. I do a lot of work in well, I work for DCYF, and so any resources for neurodivergent parenting and just neurodivergent affirming parenting, I feel like is so beneficial.
I'll be happy to share some that I'm pulling together, and I'll be pulling together more over time because that's the point in my course prep that I'm on right now is pulling together those resources. So I'm very deep diving into that, and I'm happy to share what I gather together.
Hey y'all. My tech isn't working. I can't see everyone. I don't know why. Samantha, I just wanted to say I'm like giddy from your training today. It was so lovely and such a gift. Thank you for bringing it to us.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I was, kind of challenged lately. There's so many groups and so many, presentations put together for parents of, autistic children, and especially when it comes to behaviors and things like that. And in one situation, I was asking, I was saying I don't see any self-advocates on this panel that you've put together. And, it kind of was sent back to me as well, we want this to be, we put a lot of thought into this. We want this to be a safe place for parents and all this other stuff. And so I had to take a while to really sit with that and figure out why that was bothering me so much. And then I realized it's because like I'm a parent too. Like, I am an autistic parent to autistic children who also deserves a space to talk about these things, who also deserves a space to learn about these, different challenges that my family or others may be having. And if a safe place is a place where people can just kind of talk negatively about their children, like, that sounds terrible. Like to me, as an autistic human with autistic children, like if you're not comfortable having autistic people in that space because of the things that these parents are going to be saying, like that's also a problem because a lot of those parents may not realize that they also have the same neurotype that their child does. And so I did send a response. I have still a lot of feelings about it. Um, but that's where I realized like we are also just routinely being left out of the conversation and left out of the representation. And anyway.
Yeah, I've been working as like a dyad therapist with children dyads where autism is present for 10 years, and I realized during your talk today this is the first time I haven't just built it myself. This is my first training in 10 years on it. It's fine. The state of the situation is fine. Like specifically as a like not behavioralist, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I lead with that I'm not very interested in behavior, and that's not like what I'm doing with families. Anyway, thanks. Thanks for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Marie, I will let you take over and
Well, let me stop the recording.